A thread by Carlos Osuita. The New York Times predicts a Donald Trump landslide victory. They just don't know they predicted it. These are two articles from 1972, when Nixon won 49 states. The first article, the New York Times, How Nixon Will Win, published 1972. Kevin Phillips, author of the book The Emerging Republican Majority, analyzes Republican strategy to win the presidential election. It's eerie how Kevin Phillips's remarks are 100% relevant to 2020. Quote, Richard Nixon is the heavy favorite to win in November for several reasons. In the first place, he is the incumbent, respected, albeit not loved, with the powers of the presidency at his command during the next 3 months. Secondly, the United States is in the midst of political upheaval, and the forces of the new politics are not numerous enough, despite McGovernite predictions, to outvote the realigning elements of the existing electorate. U.S. turnout ratios tend to lag and then, in certain years, jump under some political or cultural spur. During this century, large increases in turnout have occurred in elections marked by these factors. 1, popular desire to keep America from entering a war, the elections of 1916 and 1940. 2, religious and ethnic tribalism, 1928 and 1960. 3, maintenance of societal stability, 1896, 1920, 1924, 1936, and 1952. It may seem odd or even improper to lump the Roosevelt landslide of 1936 in with the obvious bourgeois value affirmations of 1896, 1920, 1924, and 1952. However, I would argue that in 1936, Roosevelt was perceived as the man whose 1932 to 1936 efforts were bringing America out of chaos and not, like George McGovern, threatening to push the country into it. In this, a vote for Roosevelt was a vote for stability. To some extent, just how much we have yet to see, U.S. political partisanship is shedding its old income group cleavage. Cultural differences, morality, living style, and group rivalries are taking over. With the rise of George McGovern, the Democrats have donned the love beads, pre-faded denims, and purple sunglasses of affluent liberalism. Lower income perceptions of the two parties are changing. While youthful McGovernites may claim empathy with the 53-year-old poor white from Chicago, the feeling is not reciprocated. To the contrary, the poor white may feel his culture endangered by them and be driven to the polls to vote against them. Note, too, that the last big spurt in the electorate came in 1952, another occasion when the Democratic candidate was the hero of the intelligentsia and the GOP candidate stood for the values of the man in the street. The cutting edge of voter turnout ultimately depends on the nature of alienation. McGovern's people think it runs their way, but the White House is banking on the opposite view, capsuled by California pollster Don Muchmore. Muchmore says, McGovern has got a great issue in alienation, but I wonder if he knows the cause. The people who are alienated are the ones who don't want pot, who don't want abortion, who don't want to pay 1 cent more in taxes. Or, as the Socialist Party journal New America puts it, quote, McGovern is partly correct that the categories of left and right are not relevant to his campaign, but the categories of class are. His followers, unlike those of George Wallace, are the products of affluence and education who claim a moral edge on the rest of society. Carlos continues, read the rest. You'll be amazed. Now, the second New York Times article predicting a Trump landslide victory. Issues 1972. Seymour Siegel, in an article on why he will vote for Nixon for re-election, holds Nixon has been spectacularly effective in foreign policy. From the article, quote, I have never voted for a Republican presidential candidate. This year I shall vote for President Nixon. I have enlisted as an active worker in the campaign for his re-election. My vote for the president is the result of weighing his approach to three different aspects of national life: foreign policies, the possibilities of an open society, and the values that form a national lifestyle. President Nixon's foreign policy, by and large, has been spectacularly effective. He has managed to combine realism with flexibility and thus brought about a breakthrough in our relations with the other superpowers. He has avoided total capitulation and illusion about the forces involved in today's world. He has also not been the prisoner of an inflexible attitude towards the powers which determine the course of world events. The state of Israel is a legitimate issue. In the case of the Middle East, this stance of negotiating from strength has been especially effective. There is no doubt, and the Israelis seem the first to agree, that Israel is in a far better position today than it was 4 years ago. Jews have always prospered in an open society. An open society means an approximation of the ideal where individuals are judged by what they are, not by which group they belong to. It refers to a social system in which ingenuity, energy, and native endowment are rewarded regardless of who possesses them. The two main threats to an open society are a caste system in which people are frozen into the condition into which they are born, and a quota society in which the rewards of the community are apportioned according to some formula. It seems obvious that the kind of society, social policy Senator McGovern has espoused has the overtones of percentage distribution of the rewards of our society. He has already, in the case of the Democratic Convention, apportioned delegate seats on the basis of sex and race. Equally important is the question of national lifestyle. It is apparent that the direction of a society is a reflection of the values espoused by the consensus of the community. Gary Wills sees Nixon upholding the venerable liberal ideas of achievement through effort, restraint, a recognition of the importance of structure and tradition, and the value of giving everyone a chance to start at the same place without guaranteeing they will end up in a dead heat. McGovern's election would certainly bring to power those whose morality and worldview would be very different than those now held by the majority of Americans. End quote. Read the rest. It's not possible to accept any data at this point because the leftist pollsters are all lying. Today, I found 20-point swings between claims of the percentage of early voters who are Republican or Democrat. All we know is that the turnout will dwarf the 2016 turnout, and that by itself means Trump will win hugely. Biden's pathetic stump speeches are simply attacks on Trump, and now he's yelling peevishly, like a sullen old man who blames the world for his own failures. We need to add several more factors to the amazing confluences between the 1972 and 2020 elections. Nixon won in 1968 by being the law and order candidate. That carried over to 1972 when leftist domestic terrorism was in full swing. Sound familiar? Trump's enemies are raving lunatics. The press is nothing but raving lunatics. Big tech is openly trying to tip the scales for the raving lunatics, and everybody knows it. The 2020 domestic terrorism is totally brainless and irrational. There isn't one legitimate argument for replacing Trump. And Trump's base is the most diverse in American history. Link in the thread. God opened my heart, and that's how I became a big fan. The last factor. In 2016, Trump got 5% of Democrats. Anyone think Trump will only get 5% of the Democrats this time around? Link in the thread, liberal hive mind. Incredible number of Democrats supporting Trump.
I will be president that God ever created.